Hello, my name is Ana Barrianuevo, and I'll be presenting the ethical case of Haruko Obokata. Haruko Obokata was a stem cell researcher at the Reigen Center in Japan. She was the head of the Cell Development Lab, and in 2014, she was found guilty of scientific misconduct. Earlier that year, she published 2 journal articles in Nature Journal, which were titled Stimulus-Triggered Fate Conversion of Somatic Cells into Pluripotency and Bidirectional Development Potential in Reprogrammed Cells with Acquired Pluripotency. Now, in these articles, she basically stated that she was able to obtain pluripotent stem cells simply by submitting somatic cells in a citric acid bath. She titled these Stimulus-Triggered Acquisition of Pluripotency cells, or STAPs. This was a huge discovery for the stem cell field because these pluripotent stem cells could then be stimulated to differentiate into any type of cell in the body, which would give the stem cell field the ability to generate new tissue or organs that could not be rejected by the body. Now, after these articles were published, many questions started to arise. Scientists stated that the experiment could not be replicated. They also stated that the images seemed modified and that there were sections of the journal that had been taken from other journal articles that had not been cited. So Nature decided to retract the journal and only republish if the experiment could be replicated. And Reigen Center started an investigation on Obokata. The investigation concluded that in fact there was image modification. On one of the articles previously mentioned, the figure 1F on D2 and D3, the investigation stated that the cells seem distorted and unnatural. Also, that in figure 1I, lane 3, which was the positive control for pluripotency, was added later on. And that in fact the gel was extended so that the bands on lane 4 and 5 matched the bands on lane 3. Finally, on figure 2, D and E, they found that it was the same figures from her doctoral thesis, and her doctoral thesis wasn't cited in this study. For her doctoral thesis, she submitted bone marrow cells through mechanical stress to obtain spherical cells. Now, this had nothing to do with the STAP cells. The investigation also found that there were 17 lines that were taken from the method section on karyotyping from a study done by Juo in 2005. When confronted with this, Obokata simply stated that she forgot to cite the author. Finally, Reigen Center was able to conclude that the experiment was not able to be replicated because Obokata had not obtained enough notes. She only had 2 journals for 3 years of research in this study. They also found that the so-called STAP cells were actually embryonic stem cells that were contaminating a somatic cell culture. So in 2016, Obokata published a book named Ano Hai, which is that day in English, where she blamed Wakayama, which was one of her co-authors, for setting her up for misconduct. She stated that he had handed her the contaminated cells and that he handled most of the experiments. However, if he had handled most of the experiments, he would have been the main author in that paper and would have been the one to blame in the scandal. So there were many ethical alternatives that Obokata could have done to avoid research misconduct. For one, she should have cited her doctoral thesis figure, and she should have cited that other author's karyotyping method. That way she would have avoided plagiarism. As for the modified images, that simply should not have been done. Modifying data directly obstructs the advancement of knowledge, which contradicts any scientist's goal. She also should have revised her paper before submitting it. That way she would have noticed that she hadn't cited the author Guo in that karyotyping method, and therefore she would have avoided plagiarism as well. And finally, if in fact her co-author had set her up for misconduct and the cell cultures were contaminated, she should have tested the cell cultures before performing the experiment, and she should have also double-checked the images to look for any discrepancies. That said, Obokata wasn't the only one to blame for misconduct. Her co-authors should have taken some responsibility as well. I say this because Wakayama was the head of the lab where Obokata did the study. He should have been supervising Obokata and making sure that the results matched the data. Sasai was Obokata's mentor, and he was in fact the one who compiled the paper and reviewed it before it was submitted to Nature. So he definitely should have noticed that there was a lack of citing and discrepancies in the images. So research misconduct is unethical because it betrays the scientific community's trust, where scientists work off of each other's data to obtain new knowledge. That said, it not only betrays the scientific community trust, it also betrays the public.